Good evening, I'm Ces Oreña-Drilon.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
The big stories tonight. Instead of showing up, Zaldy Co resigns as a member of the House of Representatives. The Justice Department says it's just a matter of time before the former party-list congressman will be considered a fugitive.
And Vice President Sara Duterte and Senator Francis Escudero took separate pot shots at late Representative Martin Romualdez today. The former House Speaker, though, can only see the criticism pointing to the national elections of 2028.
And there seems to be a growing pushback on making the probe of the Independent Commission for Infrastructure public. That as the ICI releases its first major finding and gets a new advisor and investigator.
I don't expect him to come home. I mean, the way that everything is right now, I don't think he will just go home. Hindi mo paparandang yan. Hindi naman siya fugitive, pero gano'n na magiging status siya later on. That's inevitable.
Today would have been the deadline for Ako Bicol Party List Representative Zaldy Co to come home. That's based on the ultimatum given to him by House Speaker Boji D after he revoked Co's travel authority. But there's still no Zaldy Co. Instead, what the Speaker got was the embattled lawmaker's resignation letter. In it, Co cited as primary reason for his quitting the real, direct, grave, and imminent threat to his life and that of his family. Co also attributed his decision not to return to the House, what he called was the evident denial of his right to due process of law. Co said Ako Bicol will be the one to choose his replacement. With Co's refusal to come home, Justice Secretary Boying Remulla says he doesn't expect Co ever coming forward. That's to face allegations of his involvement in the flood control scandal. Still, Remulla says it's not too late for Co to return or he risks being declared a fugitive.
Pag dumating siya, kanino siya magsasalita? Kung gusto niya magsalita.
Diretso na sa ombudsman yan. I don't expect him to come home. I mean, the way that everything is right now, I don't think he will just go home. Hindi mo paparandang yan. He'll be a fugitive.
Bakit po, sir?
Wala. Hindi ba ganyan talaga pagka may problema ang tao, lumayas? Hindi naman siya fugitive, pero gano'n na magiging status siya later on. That's inevitable.
According to Malacanang, the DOJ has already requested Interpol for a blue notice. That is so the international organization can track the former lawmaker's every move while abroad. Last week, Secretary Remulla said there were indications that Co is in France. Now, the Justice Chief mentioned a different location.
Spain yata, Spain.
And in other news, it's the former Senate President versus the former Speaker of the House. Senator Ces Escudero has strongly called out Congressman Martin Romualdez for allegedly sparking chaos amid the investigation on flood control projects. In a manifestation today, Escudero accused Romualdez of a so-called script portraying senators as fall guys for anomalous government contracts.
Isang tao lamang, Ginoong Pangulo, ang nasa likod ng script at sarswelang ito. Siya ang dahilan ng kaguluhan, pagkakaaway-away, pagkakawatak-watak na ngayon yumayanig sa ating bayan. Bakit tila sa Kamara, dito mismo sa Senado at sa ilang media ay hindi pa din nila kayang sambitin ang pangalan niya? Pues, sasabihin ko, Martin Romualdez. Pilit na ginagawang panakipbutas, ika nga at fall guy, at diversyon ang mga senador, palayo sa Kamara at sa mga tunay na may sala.
Escudero went on to say that in 2024, he actually redirected flood control funds to the Department of Agriculture. He also said he told the President about the anomalies in the 2025 budget.
Marahil, isa rin ito sa mga dahilan kung bakit ninais ng Pangulo na matanggal si Congressman Zaldy Co bilang chairman ng House Committee on Appropriations Sinisi po sa akin ni Speaker Romualdez ang pagkakatanggal kay Congressman Zaldy Co. Sinisi po niya sa akin ang pag-FLR or for late release ng kanilang mga proyekto.
The former Senate President also pointed to Romualdez as behind the impeachment case against Vice President Sara Duterte.
Nais ko din pong kumpirmahin ang sinabi ni Congressman Toby Chanco na ang pag-file ng impeachment complaint laban kay Vice President Sara Duterte ginamit na paraan ni Speaker Romualdez para mag-release ng pondo nila na naka-FLR or for late release bago mag-eleksyon. Maski na alam po niya na hindi po ito kayang talakayin ng Senado hanggang sa Hunyo pa mula nung simula. Ginamit ni Martin Romualdez ang FLR at ang pangalan ng Pangulong Marcos upang itulak ang kanilang unconstitutional na impeachment complaint. Sabi nila, pumirma kayo dahil kung hindi lalabas ang pondo nyo na naka-FLR bago mag-eleksyon.
Romualdez was quick to issue a statement that partly read, "With respect, what we heard was not an expose but a DDS script, the same recycled accusations we have long seen on troll pages and social media posts." He also insisted that Escudero's criticism is nothing new and not true. Romualdez further said, quote, "Instead of answering the serious questions he himself must face, Senator Escudero chose to deflect. He did not deny the allegations against him. He did not explain his own role in flood control kickbacks. Imbes na magpaliwanag, nanisi siya." Malinaw naman ang katotohanan, ang talumpati ni Senator Escudero ay hindi tungkol sa pananagutan, kundi para isulong ang kanyang personal na ambisyon. The former House Speaker went on to say it was a performance designed to profess loyalty and service to Vice President Sara Duterte and to position himself as her ally for 2028. Ang tunay na pinagsisilbihan ay hindi ang katotohanan, kundi ang sariling interes at plano sa politika. In the end, Romualdez said he will cooperate with every impartial investigation and stressed that his record can withstand scrutiny. Now, interestingly, as Escudero delivered his speech, Vice President Sara Duterte was seen watching from the gallery. She stayed at the Senate session hall and was an audience to the regular session a few hours after her office's budget was approved by the upper chamber.
Meantime, the Independent Commission for Infrastructure, or ICI, has recommended charges against resigned Congressman Zaldy Co and several other public works officials. That's still over an anomalous flood control project in Nauhan, Oriental Mindoro, worth more than 289 million pesos. This is the first major finding of the ICI, which was immediately filed before the Office of the Ombudsman. Among the charges the ICI wants filed are graft, malversation of public funds, falsification of public documents, and violation of the Government Procurement Act. The complaints covers officials of SunWest Incorporated, the project's contractor. SunWest is in fact a company which Zaldy Co himself instituted. The commission has also suggested raps against DPWH Mimaropa officials, including its regional director, Gerald Pacanan.
Ito po ay kauna-unahang pagpa-file po at pag-sasubmit ng rekomendasyon ng ICI sa Ombudsman. Marami pa pong darating, pagsusumikap po ang ICI para po mapabilis ang proseso na hindi magsasakripisyo sa quality ng aming trabaho dahil kailangan po namin maging masinop.
And it's not just Senator Escudero who's calling out former House Speaker Martin Romualdez. In a press conference after her office's budget hearing at the Senate, Vice President Sara Duterte tagged Romualdez as having received kickbacks from illegal gambling. The Vice President claimed that this is just one of Romualdez's sources of corruption.
Pati sa sa illegal gambling, tumatanggap sila. So, si Martin Romualdez. So, hindi lang siya sa flood control. Marami pang iba pang mga sources ng corruption na dinideliver. Hindi siya odd for Martin Romualdez because he was already involved in heavy luggages doon sa Okada case. Kung maalala ninyo, doon sa State of Delaware case sa Amerika, nabanggit na yung pangalan niya doon at nabanggit na rin yung pangalan niya doon na tumatanggap ng pera na nakalagay sa luggages.
Romualdez immediately countered the vice president in a statement. He said Duterte is just imagining things and accusing him without proof. Romualdez also addressed the Okada, Delaware issue, saying it's clear that he was not involved. He was never investigated, nor was he an accused in the case, and that the issue is being revived to discredit him.
Now let's go into the details of today's developments with our resident geopolitical analyst, Richard Haydarian. Good evening, Richard. Welcome back to the big story.
So, good evening, good morning. Parang kakalabas ko lang, mas magulo na naman ang Pilipinas.
Teka, nasaan ka?
I'm at Oxford right now. So.
All right, a short plane ride away from Spain.
Exciting.
Baka gusto mong mag-imbestiga at maghanap doon.
Well, I mean, kanina lang kausap natin si Attorney Cristina Conti, no, to keep abreast with developments in the ICC, no? And itong issue ng interim release is something very serious. In fact, earlier this year, someone told me na Portugal was supposedly open to hosting the president for interim release. But now we're hearing other potential European countries. Also kasama din dyan yung Netherlands. So I'm keeping also abreast with developments just across the channel dyan sa continental Europe. So interesting din yan. Kanina lang nakita natin development, isa pang development, a former ICC criminal, isang top general in Serbia, was granted hindi lang interim release, pinabalik siya sa Serbia on health grounds. 2005 pa yung case niya, so he served a lot of time in detention. But now we have a precedence whereby a former person who was held criminally liable by the ICC has been granted kind of a special come home retreat or retirement dahil sa health grounds. So if I'm sure the Duterte camp will look at that and try to press further, hindi lang for interim release, but possibly to scuttle the whole thing altogether.
O sige, doon na muna tayo sa issue ni dating President Duterte. And then we go to Co. But, so...
On the other side of the ocean.
Right. But, okay, there's so many disinformation about what's happening in The Hague. One is about his health and the visit that was made to the former president by the DFA. So, what do you make of that?
Well, again, there's a lot of... I know your question on Spain had to do with the other person you were asking about, but I wanted to remind people that actually that Southern European region is also in our radar because we're wondering if any of them has been open also to granting interim release to President Duterte. Now, again, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. I think Congressman Polong implied that Senator Trillanes was in town in The Hague and was part of a conspiracy, welfare conspiracy to check on Duterte. That's something that obviously everyone has denied. And then my point is it doesn't make sense for someone like Trillanes to be involved. Kasi for you to do a welfare check, dapat pumasok si Trillanes doon sa room ni Digong. Papayag kaya si Digong na makipag-meet kay Trillanes. Baka naman kung anong mangyari dyan. But for me, at this point in time, I think what people are pushing for, including the prosecution panel, is to create a panel of experts to assess whether former President Rodrigo Duterte is indeed unfit to stand trial. Kasi so far, we have only one anonymous, I think, psychologist or psychiatrist who checked on him and detected supposed deficiencies or gaps in his cognitive functioning. But I don't think that should be enough. And I think the correct way forward is for a panel to assess whether the former president is fit to stand for trial. I mean, after all, kung may love life siya, according to Vice President Sara Duterte, probably naman he has enough coherence to stand for trial.
Okay, now let's move to resigned Congressman Co and the speech of the former Senate President today. Nagtuturuan ang dalawang dating head ng ating legislature. And I don't know if Senator Cheese was not charged or was not implicated, would he have done what he did today and said revealed many things about the former House Speaker. Anong
Magandang
basa mo
tanong
dito?
yan, no? Kaya nga sinabi namin nung I was there at the SONA when the president said na mahiya na kayo and basically, mahiya naman kayo and basically was saying na eto na, mag-crackdown na tayo sa corruption. The first thing that came to my mind was he opened the Pandora's box. Kasi mukhang everyone was caught off guard. I've talked to the allies of the administration. I've talked to the enemies of the administration. I've talked to a lot of people, including people in the inner circle of the president. A lot of them were quite surprised with this thing. So it looks like the president, I'm not sure if he was looking 2-3 steps ahead. This was exactly what was about to happen. Na ang mangyari dyan is because if corruption is systematic, then more or less many
Lahat sila.
institutions and
Lahat sila.
Exactly. So saan ka magsisimula and saan mag-stop, 'di ba? And who will do the investigation? Ngayon na bukas ng Pandora's box, basically you're seeing a ping-pong game kung saan nagtuturuan ng ibang tao and dito makikita mo rin na lumalabas yung political fault lines 'di ba? If you look at the speech of Ces Oreña-Drilon kanina, parang basically makikita mo na ito pa rin yung away sa impeachment ni Sara 'di ba? Yung attack ng camp ni Sara and basically now attack ni Ces sa dating Speaker of the House has to do with the impeachment issue. Diba? The whole idea was that this is a political conspiracy against the Vice President. In the same way, yung mga nagkikriticize kay Ces ngayon ay nagsasabi na, well, parang basically you're creating an excuse for not acting on impeachment and ito yung mga tao galit din sa kanya at nagpupush for investigation into alleged anomalies under the current Senate President. So it's interesting that both of them wala na sa poder pero nagmamatsling at nagpipingpong sila, which is exactly what we saw was gonna happen if this Pandora's box was gonna be opened and wala kang institutions of credibility or individuals of credibility, whether in Congress or in the Senate, to keep this under order. So with the very fact that the Vice President was there in the Senate clearly shows that this is not just Ces Oreña-Drilon trying to defend himself, but this also reflects dun sa DDS versus Marcos essentially
I
fight.
was about to say, a picture says 1,000 words, right? Yung presence niya doon, anong ibig sabihin? 2028 na yan, tandem, ganon.
Well, again, baka pinapadispar na yung isang kaibigan natin, so ayaw natin malibel. But, of course, what critics are saying is that, was this parang rehearsal for who will be the Vice President of Sara Duterte? I mean, we heard a lot of conspiracy theories. Diba? One theory was, Ces was saying mahina yung impeachment case, maybe the Congress should redo it. So one other theory was that Ces was supposedly saying na, wag na natin impeachment, ako nang bahala kay Sara. Now, apparently, there's a new conspiracy theory which is saying, well, all along, Ces was supposedly with Team DDS and supposedly this is a way for him to show strength and loyalty. But ako naman, if indeed that's the case, which I doubt, medyo mahaba po yung pila. Marami pang po yung pila para maging vice-presidente.
Pero Richard, yun nga. Pag titingnan natin yung unraveling nitong buong saga, kahit itong lang, simula nung sinabi mo, no, mahiya naman kayong lahat. Nung una kasi parang walang gusto magbanggit ng pangalan di ba? Tapos biglang parang may unspoken agreement na, sige, laglagin na natin si Zaldy Co. So naging si Zaldy Co. After a while, biglang, sige na nga, laglagin na rin natin si Martin Romualdez. So, ano tingin mo? Does the buck stop there? Or could this trace back to Malacanang?
Yeah, I mean, this clearly can metastasize, though. I mean, this can get completely out of control. In fact, the other month, habang pinag-usapan ng lahat ng tao yung kaso sa Indonesia and Nepal na talagang nagkaroon ng gulo, sabi ko, actually, pwede mangyari sa atin, nangyari sa Brazil, which is hindi nagkaroon ng total political breakdown and regime change, pero nangyari is, na-impeach yung presidente, na-impeach yung Speaker of the House, nung vice-president na umakyat, na-impeach din, yung dati nilang presidente si Lula. So I'm talking about the Operation Car Wash, no? Yung corruption scandal in Brazil 10 years ago, kung saan lahat nadamay and lahat bumagsak. So now we have so far Speaker down, President of the Senate down, but this could get out of control and could reach all the way to the presidency. Some people are wondering, bakit DPWH lang tinitignan natin? What about the Department of Budget Management, right? What about yung ibang departments na may kinalaman sa mga projects? So that's what I'm saying. That's why mahalaga yung trabaho ng Independent Commission on infrastructure. And I think this is where the president has to give maximum independence and leeway to this institution. But then again, now you saw the resignation of our mayor, right? So it's like, that's exactly what I was warning. This could get completely out of control. Of course, lahat tayo galit sa corruption, di ba? And we saw over the last weekend, talagang nagpakita ng show of force ng tao. People were very peaceful except doon sa Mendiola. But the next time, people will not be peaceful. People will get angry. All they see is ping pong and mudslinging.
I want to ask you about that protest action on September 21, because that was not the only thing that happened there. There was an attempt to for the military to withdraw support, but it failed. Where do the Americans, sorry to bring them in, but we know naman na stand in this?
Well, this is where also this is scary, no? Because hindi lang isang superpower, at least dalawang superpower ay may interest sa nangyari, right? Siguro yung isang interest niya, mananatili yung kasalukuyan na administrasyon dahil gusto nila yung polisiya na. At yung kabila naman, siguro interest nila na either pumalit yung kasalukuyan na administration at masaya sila sa potentially mag-replace sa kanya because we know what's the line of succession, or at the very least gusto nila maging magulo ang Pilipinas. So of course, to be fair, the AFP has struck down any insinuation, including by our good colleague Manny Mogato, that there was supposedly some sort of a plot, etc. But we know that if indeed that were true,
Inamin na the Chief of Staff Browner in an opinion page.
well, I mean, one version is that hindi nakakasundo yung ibang grupo kasi yung traditional defense establishment sa Pilipinas, not only they don't want to get involved sa politika, alam din nila kung magkakaroon ng change ng leadership, baka mag-benefit ang yung pro-China factions.
Yeah.
So allegedly, yun daw ang nangyari. So you can clearly see na what happens domestically at what happens sa West Philippine Sea at yung away. So hindi lang to away ng DDS Marcos.
Correct.
May global, merong...
Kaya kawawa tayo, nasa gitna tayo eh.
Kaya tama nga na geopolitical
Kaya
analyst
ikaw,
ang
sabi ko,
inibita
kaya
natin.
ikaw yung tinawag na,
pero
tinawagan na.
last na, before the other Shawn and Pao can ask, supposedly there's a faith-based group with wide influence that was involved in this.
Si Manny na lang tatanungin niyo dyan. But at the very least, we know that a faith-based group had what? 1 million people coming out earlier this year, di ba? And we know that a certain faith-based group made it very clear to the president, to everyone, na hindi nila gusto na ma-impeach yung vice-presidente natin. But let's not forget, that's not the only faith-based group, right, who may have an interest in showing force. There are other faith-based groups who may also have interest. We see the Catholic Church also stepping up. We see Cardinal David Ambo also stepping up, obviously on the side of the trillion peso march in terms of a rule of law-based approach. And then, if one of the senators who's now being accused of corruption, he faces a real danger of criminal liability, we know that there's a senator who also has a major religious group behind him. So this is what I'm fearing, that maybe we are peering into the abyss unless this independent commission infrastructure gets its act together, moves on from this whole Magalong episode. I don't want to go into the details of that, but importantly, the ombudsman. Sobrang delayed yung appointment ng bagong ombudsman. Ang tagal na itong issue na ito. I know it has to do something with the Romualdez cases and ICC and all of that. Kaya related lahat to, di ba? Nagsasama-sama eh.
Pero
parang lasagna ito eh.
Na-clear na siya ng
Pero
ombudsman.
na-clear na siya. So I hope the JBC will move ahead fast. Yung tatlo na propose niya kay President Marcos. Maybe Romualdez is there, maybe it's not. But President Marcos has to choose someone of utmost integrity and also political will. Kasi yung ombudsman could be the coup de grace. Right? Okay. Could be the deus ex
Furious
machina
forecast mo
who
ba?
could give some sort of...
Richard, furious forecast mo sino?
Yeah, Remulla clearly is the front runner for that, and Remulla has already shown that he's willing to push the envelope against the Dutertes. But would Remulla be seen by, let's say, progressives, pinks, and the rest of population na hindi damay doon sa DDS versus PBM? Would he be seen as the optimal ombudsman? I think a lot of people are going for Kim Henares, the former BIR chief. Some people like Heidi Mendoza have other people in mind among the candidates. I hope at least the final 3 candidates ay maayos. And then let's hope that the president will justify whatever final decisions he make. Because ang hirap ng trabaho ng darating na ombudsman, but the ombudsman has so much power. That ombudsman can go after all of these people who are ping-ponging each other and then magpakita ng resibo based on AMLAC na itong mga to lahat sila may anomalyang ginawa, moto proprio, pwede siya magsubpoena, and pwede siya mag-coordinate ng all necessary legal action because people are asking for blood. People want heads to roll. I mean, proverbially, obviously. Di ba nakita natin si Vice Ganda, kaibigan natin si Cara David. I mean, nagte-trending na yung mga sinasabi. People are angry. And this kind of ping-pong is maybe helping the politicians, but it's not helping to die down the emotions. If anything, lalo maiinis ang taong bayan.
Yeah, yun nga, Richard, the question is, will we actually see jail time for these politicians? I mean, where is this investigation going? History has shown that
we're getting
only
sidetracked
small
by the
fish,
politics.
Exactly. How do we cut through the noise and make sure we really get accountability?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember an interview a few years ago with Chel Jokno when he was running for Senate. Ang sabi na, isa sa mga dahilan nandito tayo ngayon is hindi natin binibigyan ng pansin yung isang elemento ng accountability, which is the justice system. Kung pansin nyo, tinitignan natin mga congressman, Zaldy Co, tinitignan natin yung mga senador, Cheese, or kung sino man ang nag-aarap ng allegations ngayon. And of course, the president, right, who got the ball rolling or opened the Pandora's box. Pero wag natin kalimutan, yung mga people sa judicial institutions natin, whether the law firms and hotshot lawyers are protecting or supposedly protecting certain individuals, the judges who have made questionable decisions. Some people are looking at the Sandigan Bayan and the ruling that it has made recently vis-a-vis yung mga ill-gotten wealth accusations against the Marcoses, right? So habang hindi naayos yung ating judicial institution, from what the DOJ does, all the way to regional trial courts, all the way to, of course, different manifestation of the justice system, hindi maging maayos yan. Kasi yung hearings and all of that, okay, what's next, right? And you need accountability. And the last time we had a major corruption scandal, which was the Napoles PDAF scandal, saan tayo napunta, di ba? There was no justice really at the end of the day, or justice was super delayed. So almost denied. And I don't think that will cut it this time. Ako sa palagay ko, maybe Manny was up to something. Now maybe we came close to the precipice, or if not, peered into abyss. Pero kung tuloy-tuloy lang, purong hearing lang and ping-pong yan, the very people who did the peaceful part of the rally last September 21, next time, baka they'll be much more open to a Mendiola style of riot, which we also covered, and I was on standby last weekend when we were discussing it on TV5 and One News. So para sa akin, this is an explosive situation. I hope the president recognizes that. Kaya dapat maayos sa ombudsman, dapat mag-step up itong independent commission. Para sa akin, dapat mag-step up din yung other civil society groups and institutions na may kredibilidad at wala silang kinalaman sa Team Marcos versus Team Duterte. Because if we're stuck at that level, nothing happens and it doesn't have any credibility. It looks like just pure partisan politics.
All right, we thank you for talking to us. We're looking forward to your report from Spain. That was geopolitical analyst
Zaldy Co assignment. I'm sorry about that.
Richard Haydarian.
Right, we're just going to take a quick break, but coming up, Senator Ces Escudero begins suing his accusers as promised. He has filed a disbarment case against lawyer Jess Falsis, who joins us live later on the show. The Big Story returns in a bit. Keep it here on One News.
You're watching The Big Story here in One News. Senator Ces Escudero vowed to sue those who have accused him of involvement in the recent flood control mess. He also vowed to protect the upper chamber from what he said were wrong accusations. Escudero further accused former Speaker Martin Romualdez of sowing discord across sectors to distract the public. In fact, he asked, why is Romualdez and other congressmen missing in ongoing investigations despite being named in affidavits and testimonies?
For what is happening now is selective justice and mob justice. Members of the Senate have been thrown off a cliff before the court of public opinion in an attempt to mollify the people's rage, thereby covering up the real perpetrators and giving them a chance to get away. Ginoong Pangulo, hindi ba natin nakikita? Napilit tayong pinag-aaway-away. Mayaman, mamamayan laban sa lingkod bayan. Lokal laban sa nasyonal na opisyal. Congressman laban sa kapwa congressman. At ngayon, senador laban sa kapwa senador. Pamilya laban sa pamilya. Pilipino laban sa kapwa Pilipino. Ginoong Pangulo, tandaan po natin, mas madaling manipulahin at ang nag-aaway at nagkakawatak-watak na bansa. At ito ang eksaktong gusto nilang mangyari.
Escudero went on to emphasize his record in public service. According to him, this deliberate campaign on selective justice and political manipulation by Romualdez is undermining the very foundation of the country's democratic institutions. That's why he is determined to file charges against his accusers.
I will defend myself, Mr. President, against these malicious and false allegations. In fact, I have already filed and will be filing necessary and appropriate charges against my accusers and prove them wrong. And with the help of the Almighty, I will be vindicated and declared innocent, I am sure.
And so Senator Ces Escudero did file a case, disbarment, before the Supreme Court against lawyer Jesus Falsis III. That's for alleged violation of the Code of Professional Responsibility, which governs the conduct of attorneys, including their online presence. In his post, Falsis called Escudero shameless, the worst Senate president in history, and, quote, even bulok na keso. Let's bring in Attorney Jess Falsis himself. Welcome back to the Big Story, Attorney Jess. So, ikaw ang unang nasampulan ni dating Senate President Ces Escudero.
Good evening, ladies. Good evening sa lahat ng mga nakikinig. Ang unang tanong ko lang dyan, mga ladies, no, bakit ako yung nauna? So, is it because I'm a small person na kayang-kaya niyang tirahin? Because if he's talking about his accusers, I am not an accuser. Mga ladies, no, mga ma'am and sir, I am not an accuser. I am a commentary analyst. Nagpo-post ako commentating on the news. If you will canvass my Facebook page or any of my social media platforms, which is Facebook and Twitter, where I post my commentaries, I usually and will always try to post a balita to react on. Yung caption ko will just be my own commentary, my own opinion on what is being reported. So for example, yung mga 142 billion budget insertion, hindi naman ako ang nag-accuse niyan, mga ladies, no? It was Politico PH that first reported that, or other news outlets, no, online or TV channels. It was not me. And then yung sa Senate hearing, hindi naman ako ang nag-accuse ng 160 million na kickback. It was Yusek Roberto Bernardo. So bakit hindi niya kinasuhan kagad ng perjury or ng libel si Roberto Bernardo? At bakit disbarment ang kaso sa akin? Bakit hindi cyber libel kung talagang nakakasira sa reputation niya yon?
Mm-hmm. But do you acknowledge that it may affect your reputation as a lawyer by saying what some may consider libelous? Bulok na keso, medyo libelous yata yun, hindi ba?
Oh, it cannot be libelous, Ma'am Ces, no? Because bulok na keso is a play of words on his nickname, which is cheese, no? And hindi ba kabulok-bulok yung ginawa niya about the budget insertion? Ang ano ko kasi dyan, Ma'am Ces, no, there's already a case filed. And technically, that case should be confidential. He should not really be stating that, no? But because he already made it public, I'll just answer a bit and then not really respond to the case because I haven't read the entire complaint. But if we're talking about the three quote-unquote comments, no, na talagang hina-highlight ni Senator Ces, which is shameless, bulok na keso, tsaka worst president in Senate history or worst Senate president in history, those are all opinions and they are political opinions. Under the Constitution, political speech is the highest form of freedom of speech. And ito yung gusto ko ding iambag sana, no? Ang lawyers, just because we are lawyers doesn't mean we are stripped of our freedom of speech, especially when making satire or when making sarcastic, pointed comments. So, lahat na lang dry, lahat na lang parang bland yung commentary. Hindi pwede. By the way, ako kasi, mga ladies, hindi ako lawyer lang. Ang aking undergraduate degree is political science. So ever since, even before ako naging lawyer, nagpo-post na ako about my political opinions or commentaries and analysis about the state of things. Mula pa yan sa panahon ni Pinoy, no, nung nagsimula ang Facebook sometime 2008. Yeah. I've been consistent in posting my political opinions. So I would like to argue na those kind of statements are not unethical for me as a lawyer because he's only looking at me as a lawyer lang. One, I'm also a Filipino citizen, and second, I'm a political scientist. So those are pointed, kahit pointed siya, entitled ako to pointed commentaries because I just have to describe things as it is. He is the worst Senate president in history. Why is he not the worst Senate President? If you compare all other Senate Presidents, sino ang Senate President in history who was popularly embroiled or plagued by controversies? At most, makakompare mo lang sa kanya is Senator Juan Ponce Enrile. But even then, si Senate President Juan Ponce Enrile was commended for handling or how he handled the impeachment trial of Chief Justice Corona. He was able to handle it well in terms of procedure, in terms of gravitas, etc., etc. Na ano lang siya doon sa pork barrel, which is a personal matter. Here, anong issue about the Senate presidency ni Senator Cheese? It was about his handling of the budget. There are legitimate questions about how he handled, as Senate President, the most corrupt 2025 budget, which is nag-insert siya 142 billion. So imbes na kasuhan niya ako ng disbarment, maybe he should explain, which he did not explain sa privilege speech niya. He should explain the 142 billion budget insertions. 9 billion went to Sorsogon, which is his baluarte or ang hometown ng mga Escuderos. He should explain why he accepted campaign contributions from the donor Lawrence Lubiano ng Center West instead of just saying may iba ding mga politicians na may campaign contractor contributions. Even President BBM and Sara Duterte, sinabi niya people higher than him. Meron daw contractors na campaign donors. Sure, lahat sila may contractor donations, but that will not absolve him. So he should focus on himself. He should also explain why he was alleged to receive 160 million in DPWH kickback from Roberto Bernardo. Never pa in-explain ni Senator Cheese yung statement ni Roberto Bernardo, quote-unquote, alam ko ang galawan nyo sa DPWH. Sabihan mo si Sec Bonoan, babaan ako ng pondo. Senator Cheese Escudero has never explained that. So instead of filing disbarment cases and weaponization of the law against his quote-unquote accusers, na hindi naman niya accusers kasi hindi naman kami yung nag-a-accuse. We are just commentating. Okay. If the truth hurts, it's not because of us. It's because of the accusing him.
Attorney Jess, obviously, hindi ka matitinag nitong kasong to. Obviously. And is it correct, it's unethical to disclose this? He should not have and left it to the Supreme Court to, take a look at this case of disbarment against you.
So for me, after tonight, I will just leave it to the process. I will just respond, file my answer or compliance when I get, kasi I haven't received the actual complaint, only media reports. But I urge journalists to research on the matter because there are many other lawyers who publicize disbarment cases. Tapos, na-reverse, meaning nabaliktad sila. Yung nag-publicize ng pag-file ng disbarment, ang na-reprimand or napagalitan ng Supreme Court because Rule 139B of the Rules of Court strictly say confidential ang disbarment proceedings, even the filing. You don't publicize it. The only exception is the final order of the Supreme Court on the matter. Kung nag-desisyon na yung Supreme Court to disbar, suspend, reprimand, or warn the lawyer involved in the disbarment case. So madami ng lawyers, hindi ko napapangalanan, na nabaliktad. Meaning, sila yung nag-publicize, nag-file sila, nag-complain sila, tapos minidya nila, nilik pa. By the way, yung address ko, nilik din ng staff ni Senator Cheese or ni Senator Cheese mismo when he gave copies of the complaint because he did not redact my address. And then for a while before I messaged certain media outlets, my address was on social media. Eh syempre ako, madaming mga bashers, I don't know if yung iba dyan will act on their death threats because I have death threats from many different camps, hindi lang naman from one's sector. So putting my address out there is very irresponsible on the part of Senator Cheese.
Attorney Jess, lagi ka nga lumalabas sa aking FYP. So, kanina may napansin ako, yung mga observations mo, I'm asking you, I guess, to put on your political science hat for this one. Sinabi mo, parang mga nag-audition tong mga to for 2028 kasi nga dumalo si VP Sara kanina para sa budget hearing niya. Tell us, ano yung mga napansin mo doon and what stood out the most with today's events?
Well, today's privileged speeches, especially by Senator Cheese, was supposed to be a bombshell. There were reports that he would name a lot of names and explain in detail kickbacks happen aside from himself? Mga ibang senador or congressman, how does it happen? Pero eventually, it became like a nothing burger na parang wala namang nangyari, walang pasabog, which is, we already know that Speaker Martin Romualdez is being accused as well of budget insertions and his own participation or accountability in the flood control project, ghost projects, or other SOPs sa budget insertion. So it's not true anymore that Speaker Martin is the name who cannot be named. So eventually, the privileged speech seemed like an audition piece na here I am, Ces Escudero, who will really attack Martin Romualdez, who is quote-unquote the number one enemy of Vice President Sara Duterte. It seems for most independent analysts, parang doon pinakagalit si VP Sara sa ngayon. Of course, galit din si VP Sara sa ating Pangulo, pero hindi niya masyado tinitira. Ang tinitira lagi ni VP Sara is si Speaker Martin. So it seemed like an audition piece because we all know VP Sara is a front runner in 2028, and so she's looking for someone to be her vice president, and other people will naturally try to offer themselves na, oh, I can be your VP because Senator Cheese comes from Sorsogon, which is medyo north, no? Hindi siya south-south. Kasi ang formula noon, 2025, solid north plus solid south, the Marcoses and the Duterte. So VP Sara needs to pad or needs to look for a VP candidate na tandem who will bring in the numbers from Luzon or Visayas, hindi lang sa Mindanao, which is yung baluarte ng mga Duterte. So for me, it seemed like an audition piece for 2028.
Teka, attorney, sino yung name na gusto mo sana marinig na hindi mo narinig that cannot be named? Yung bagong Voldemort, sino yon?
No. It was Senator Cheese who was saying Speaker Martin is the name who cannot be named. Madaming ibang pangalan, senador at congressman, allegedly, ilalaglag daw ni Senator Cheese. Yun yung expectation kanina sa privilege speech niya. But eventually, walang ibang pinangalanan except Speaker Martin and Zaldy Co, who we already have heard from other places.
Ba't kaya nagkaganon, Attorney Jess? If Senator Ces Escudero was supposed to bear all earlier today, ano kaya nangyari? Nagkaroon ba ng negosasyon? Kasi basically, he said kanina that nililihis itong investigation and senators are being the scapegoats. And congressmen should be investigated as well.
Well, we can only speculate, no, but this is a reasonable analysis of things, no. Kung ilalaglag niya kasi yung mga ibang senador or congressman, kung yun yung mangyayari sana, no, it will be like a scorched earth policy or a Pyrrhic victory, no, na okay, nilaglag mo yung iba, pero it doesn't really help you either because one, you're making new enemies, and second, it doesn't absolve or justify whatever you did. So I go back to what I said kanina, no? Instead of filing cases against his so-called accusers, he should just explain all of these issues like the 142 billion budget insertion and yung accusation ni Roberto Bernardo, which is not my accusation.
Okay.
Attorney, just what does this mean for our country amid all this political instability? You have the House of Representatives, the Senate throwing mud at each other. That's gonna, of course, our economy will suffer, investor confidence will suffer.
Well, I don't think it will end anytime soon, no? And I cannot also say, even as a political analyst, what is the end? Because the only thing I can say is PBBM opened a Pandora's box. Pandora's box talaga yung pag-ano niya ng SONA about flood control projects because nagalit yung tao, organically talagang magagalit ang mga tao. Like ako, ba't ba ako galit na galit? Kasi naundoy kami noon ng family ko. So yung ibang tao, galit na galit because they have personal experience with the problem of flooding. And yun pala, kinukubra lang or ninanakaw lang at ghost project, yun ang pinakamalala. Hindi lang substandard, pero masama din yun. Ghost project pa. So nagalit talaga ang mga tao and people want accountability. So this will go way up where it needs to go as long as people will really demand it. No, we saw it September 21. Let's see if the action and the anger will be sustained. Kasi usually there's a fatigue. People experience fatigue when it comes to getting angry at issues. But so far, it's a Pandora's box because I don't think PBBM himself knows or knew where it will end, no? Parang he really opened this thinking na hanggang ganito lang, meron siya sigurong outcome na gusto, pero now, lahat talaga mabubulat-lat. That's why yung panawagan noong September 21, right? It's not about a specific personality.
Right.
It's lahat ng sangkot dapat managot.
Yes, but it's getting drowned out by the politics. So we must be able to focus on, demanding accountability regardless of who you are, how high up you are, right?
That's the challenge. That is the challenge for the people, not just politicians. Because syempre may sarili-sarili silang script. They want to save their own quote-unquote assets. That's the actual idiom. I cannot use any other word. No? So it's really a challenge for the people, the public mismo, taong bayan. Saan ba ito hahanto?
Huwag tayong madistract.
Correct.
Thank you for joining us. Attorney Jess Falsis, public interest lawyer and political blogger.
All right, we're going to be pausing for another quick break, but when we return, the Independent Commission for Infrastructure has found a new special advisor after Baguio City Mayor Benji Magalong's resignation. That and more stories still to come. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back to the big story. Malacanang has named former PNP Chief Rodolfo Azurin Jr. as special advisor and investigator for the Independent Commission for Infrastructure. He replaces Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong. The announcement came earlier today, 3 days after Magalong submitted his resignation. The palace said Azurin's experience and leadership would strengthen the Commission's mandate to uphold accountability and transparency in public speaking. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro clarified Azurin's role in the Commission.
So liliwanagin po natin, ang pagtalaga po sa kanya ng Pangulo ay bilang special advisor at hindi po lead investigator or in any other form na pag-iimbestiga. Hindi po siya naitalaga sa pag-iimbestiga at hindi po at wala po siyang power over the PNP and CIDG. Di naman po niya kinakailangan na ubusin ng oras sa ICI dahil hindi po siya miyembro ng ICI. Wala pong dinagdag ang Pangulo na pagiging investigador niya dahil nga po hindi po siya, or rather, he refused to resign as mayor of Baguio. So with that, nakita po ng Pangulo ang maaaring maging conflict at kaya po special advisor po ang kanyang ibinigay na magiging role ni Mayor Magalong. So wala po tayong nakikitang inconsistencies.
Meantime, the newly appointed ICI special advisor said he would first seek guidance from President Marcos before making a full statement. Azurin also thanked Marcos for the trust and praised Magalong as highly capable in the role he resigned from. Meantime, questions have emerged over whether the ICI should make its hearings public. Senator Kiko Pangilinan and Mamamayang Liberal Party List Representative Laila De Lima have both called for transparency, stressing that closed proceedings undermine oversight and raise doubts about whether the investigation protects anyone. However, ICI Executive Director Brian Hosaka defended the closures to avoid a trial by publicity and misuse of unverified testimony. Recall that previous congressional probes into flood control projects were live-streamed and protests followed. With this, Pangilinan warned secrecy could inflame unrest. For his part, Bicol Saro Party List Representative Terry Ridon has another suggestion. If live streaming is denied, he says public attendance or end-of-day briefings would do.
Now we turn to some of today's other big stories. The Philippine National Police confirms that the Mandaluyong Court has issued an arrest warrant against former PCSO General Manager Royina Garma and 4 others. This is over the 2020 killing of PCSO Board Secretary Wesley Barayuga and the shooting of his driver in Mandaluyong City. The case is non-bailable. Garma was last reported to be in Malaysia, where she, according to the DOJ, met with ICC representatives to testify against former President Rodrigo Duterte. And at the upper chamber, Senate President Tito Soto clarified that amendments or insertions during budget deliberations are part of the regular legislative process. He lamented that issues surrounding ghost and failed flood control projects have unfairly cast doubt on all amendments. This comes after Senate President pro tempore Ping Lacson revealed that nearly all senators made insertions in this year's spending fund. Soto also promised reforms in the 2026 budget to promote transparency, accountability, and greater public participation. Meanwhile, the Justice Department has reprimanded contractor Sara Diskaya after she made a finger heart gesture upon entering the agency's premises on Saturday. Sara Diskaya said she only remembered her mayoral campaign, but Justice Secretary Boying Remulla emphasized that it was not a photo opportunity. DOJ spokesperson Miko Clavano earlier called out Diskaya and said that such actions are improper given the seriousness of the case, calling for sincerity, respect, and professionalism. Diskaya, who has been implicated in controversial infrastructure projects, went to the DOJ for the continuation of the evaluation of her and her husband Curly's application to the Witness Protection Program.
And in the Netherlands, the International Criminal Court has responded to allegations about former President Duterte's health while detained in The Hague. This after Vice President Sara Duterte claimed her father was found unconscious and required laboratory tests, raising concerns about the ICC's capacity to guarantee his safety. The ICC, through Assistant to Counsel Cristina Conti, said it does not comment on private matters of detainees and ensures their physical and psychological well-being. Conti also said that medical information is highly confidential and will not be released without consent. She stressed that there is no confirmation from the ICC itself about the incident and any reports should be treated with caution. And back here at home, after 3 tropical cyclones, namely Mirasol, Nando, and Opong, struck the country, several local and provincial governments have declared a state of calamity. These are Dagupan City in Pangasinan, Cagayan, Bungabong in Oriental Mindoro, Romblon, Masbate, Calbayog in Samar, Pigiran, Ibajay in Aklan, Kadayangan in Cotabato, and Maguindanao del Sur. The 3 storms claimed 27 lives, injured 33, and left 16 missing, with losses and damage to agriculture and infrastructure nearly hitting 2 billion pesos. And corruption in government has long been a pressing issue, and the recent flood control scandals have made it even more urgent. Today, students in Manila took a stand, taking to the streets to demand accountability and transparency. Students from the University of Santo Tomas walked out of their classes and marched toward the Arc of the Centuries to protest. Our big picture tonight shows hundreds of Tomasians marching with banners and chanting for accountability. That's even as heavy rain poured down today. The walkout, organized by student groups and campus labor associations, aimed to call out corruption, particularly in flood control and other infrastructure projects. Meantime, students from the Far Eastern University also held their own walkout along Moraita Street. They demanded transparency in tuition and miscellaneous fees and called for an end to an inaccessible blended learning. But beyond campus issues, the protesters also condemned government corruption and attacks on democratic rights.
That's our reminder, no? The students, isa-isa, walk out, iba-ibang schools from Luzon to...
Good. They should continue doing that.
Kasama na rin si God. I saw this tweet because ulan nga ng ulan eh. So, you know, our anger, it's...
Kasi today parang we got lost na naman. It was all about politics. Parang...
Pero ang lakas ng ulan, di ba?
Ang lakas ng ulan.
Sobrang lakas ng ulan.
Yeah.
Right. Parang nakakalito, diba? Because they said, if you can't convince them, confuse them. And here we are so confused already with the cast and the plot.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we stay focused and we know
We
where
have
this
to
is
remember,
all going.
nililin lang nila tayo, dapat hindi tayo malit.
Malit lang.
Correct. 2028 na agad ang pinag-uusapan, di ba?
Oo. Parang ang tagal pa, no? Pero hindi.
Nakakainis.
Nakakainis talaga.
All right, and that will do it for us this Monday, or this last Monday of September. Thank you so much for watching The Big Story.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
We'll be back here tomorrow at 7:30. See you then. Have a good night, everyone.